So you may have noticed that the colors on the decorations are different now, and we have the candles up here. So you might have thought to yourself, if you're a church person, then we have entered the season of Advent. And Advent is the season in the church year. I always think of it as the season between I'm not ready for Christmas and here Christmas is anyway. So it runs for four Sundays through up until Christmas Eve, and then we get Christmas. And then the church does this differently from society. In society, we get the 12 days of Christmas, but from what I can tell, most people are so done with Christmas on the 26th that, everything's packed up before New Year's. But officially, we do Advent until Christmas, and then Christmas for 12 days afterwards. So that is the way the church does it. Now, what is Advent? Advent is a word that means coming, and what it is about is the idea that Christ is coming. So we are preparing for the coming of Christ, not the coming of Christmas. Sometimes we think Christmas is coming, but it actually means no. Christmas has already come, and that's actually the reason we have the season of Advent at this time, because we don't know exactly what the coming of Christ when he returns in glory will be like. So what we do is we look back to the coming of Christ in humility, when Christ came as a child at Christmas. And so that's the reason we position this season at this time of year, is to help us to think about the coming of Christ in a way that it may be something that is as unexpected for us as the coming of Christ was at Christmas 2,000 years ago. So that's the reason we celebrate it. Now, what is the point of doing this? And the point of doing this is that Christ is coming. We don't know when, but the purpose of Advent is to prepare us for his coming, because we don't even know when he's coming, much less if we're ready. And so every year we go through this process of kind of thinking about in what ways we aren't ready for his coming and how can we get ready. And so we do that in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways, the most obvious ways, with our music, which is not like Christmas music. If you've been in a grocery store or listened to the radio for the last, month, they've been doing Christmas music, and Christmas music is jolly, holly jolly, there's I don't know what, there's sleigh bells ringing, and there's chestnuts roasting, there's all kinds of happy imagery in Christmas songs. But Advent isn't like that. Advent songs are about waiting or hurrying up and waiting. So they're not much fun. You don't hear them in the grocery store very often because nobody especially likes them. Now, I know you're going to tell me later that, I really like these Advent songs, but I'm judging by the fact that you haven't told the grocery store operator that they need to have more Advent songs. So I'm going to assume that says something. So we don't really like them, but that doesn't mean they're bad songs, right? They may not be as enjoyable as a Christmas song, but it doesn't mean they're bad. And we're actually going to be looking at one all during December, which is the song, O Come, Emmanuel. We're going to sing it at the end of the service today. So it is a old song. It goes back at least to the 8th century and maybe as far as the 6th century. And it's part of something in Western Christendom. So what would later become Catholic Christendom, it was part of the worship service, and its name was the O antiphons. And the reason for that is because every one of the verses begins with O come Emmanuel, and so forth. And an antiphon is a kind of a call and response song. So it's calling out, and somebody else in the choir would respond. So it is an ancient song, and it's got a lot of theology in it. And so even if you don't like the music is a handy way of remembering all the theology. So we're going to be looking at this idea of Emmanuel today. The most obvious part of the song is the name. So, O come, Emmanuel. So what is Emmanuel? Emmanuel, as Matthew very handily told us, means God is with us. So they left out the verb, and sometimes they do that. Sometimes we do it. But sometimes, you can just understand it's a verb. So God is with us, and that's what it means. It means God is with us. Now, it doesn't simply mean God is nearby. it means God is with us. It means God is on our side. It means God is in your corner. It means God has your back. It is saying that you have an ally in God. God is with you. Now, that's not that hard to understand, but sometimes sometimes they've understood it to mean God is on my side and not on your side. But it doesn't mean that. Or if it does, there will be other reasons to believe it means that in a particular case. So, but in general, what it means is God is with humanity. God loves people, and so God is with us, and God is on our side. So that's what it means. It's not exclusivist. It's really a very inclusive statement. God is on our side. And it's not hard to understand that, but sometimes it's hard to believe it. Right now, on Thursday, when your belly was full and you're sitting on the couch and you're watching the game and you have heat and the earthquake didn't destroy anything this time, you're thinking, of course, God is on my side. God's got my back, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes our circumstances make it harder for us to believe that God is on our side. Sometimes, and it can be anything. It can be, I was talking to Marvin in the hospital yesterday. This problem, he had to get his toe amputated and it developed very quickly. So sometimes, you might say, well, wait, I'm still coming to grips with this, and it's very hard for me to imagine that God's on my side. Now, I'm not putting words in his mouth. Actually, I hope if I ever have major surgery, I'll have the positive attitude he does. But I can imagine, people facing health challenges are often kind of reeling, and they're kind of saying, wait, what does this say about God? Is he really on my side? Is God really with me? Has God got my back? Because, man, I'm really feeling like it's all landed on me right now. So sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's a relationship, that something broke down and it, we're not headed in a good direction right now. And we're kind of thinking, well, maybe, it's God. Maybe it's our job, it's our finances. Maybe, we can see the handwriting on the wall and ChatGPT is going to eliminate us, or some factory on the other side of the planet's going to eliminate us. We don't know all the things that go on in this world, but sometimes it's a lot harder to believe that God has our back than it was on Thanksgiving Day. So that is the reason that we call God Emmanuel, and we see that in our reading today in Isaiah and quoted then in Matthew's Gospel. So we'll start with Isaiah. So we're going to be looking just at a couple of verses from Isaiah. The weird thing about Emmanuel is, you'd think that idea, because it is an important idea, you'd think it would be all through the Bible. And I would say it's kind of in the background of the whole Bible, but it's not stated explicitly in the Bible except 4 times. Twice it's just a sentence, God is with us. And so it's not a name or anything. And then the 2 times it's a name, one is in Isaiah and the other one is in Matthew, the 2 that we read earlier. So it is a strange name, and because it's not common, it's actually spelled differently in the New Testament and the Old Testament. So all in the Old Testament they did it with an I, and the New is with an E. So now you can win at trivia. So in Isaiah, we're going to look at the I version first. So Isaiah is recording an event in the history of Israel, or actually in Judah. The Lord spoke to Ahaz. So he just got done speaking, and now he's going to speak again. So he says, ask for a sign from the Lord your God. This is God speaking to Ahaz. He's saying, I can tell, I'm God. I can tell you don't trust me. Let me give you a sign so you will trust me. He says, make it as deep as the grave or as high as heaven. It can be anything. It can be supernatural stuff, writing in the sky, whatever you want. I will give you a sign so you trust me. And the reason he needs a sign, the reason he's not trusting God is because he's got problems. So if he looks out over the walls of Jerusalem, he sees armies there that are trying to conquer Jerusalem. So this is about 700 BC. And let me just kind of give you the lay of the land. So that's the Middle East, of course. And right now, that in the book of Isaiah, there's 4 major countries that are occupying the prophet's attention. So the big one is the Assyrian Empire, and it doesn't actually affect this part right here. But so to zoom in, so there's 3 countries. There's Judah, and then there's Israel and Aram. So Judah is where Isaiah is ministering, and he is Ahaz is the king of Judah. And the problem is that the northern part of what was once the kingdom of David has now split off. It's now the separate nation of Israel, and it has formed an alliance with a country called Aram, and they are trying to conquer Judah. So they want to kind of reverse the split by absorbing Judah. And so they have got an army outside the walls of Jerusalem, and they're saying, we're going to conquer you really quick here. And so Judah's got problems, and Ahaz is the king, and really he's not up to the challenge. He's not, he's a lightweight. He can't handle this. But Isaiah has told him, God's got your back. God is on your side. You can handle this because God is with you. And that's the situation as we pick this up. And he says, well, all right, I can tell you don't believe, so how can I persuade you? What sign would persuade you? And Ahaz says, I won't ask, I won't test the Lord. So if you've ever wondered, what does the word sanctimonious mean? He's being sanctimonious here. What he's doing is he's saying, he's quoting the Bible, I will not put the Lord to the test. So, and that is in the Bible, so you shouldn't do that, except if God says, test me, right? That's your get out of jail free card. You may test the Lord if he specifically says, test me. And Ahaz says, I won't. And the reason he won't is the reason a lot of us don't look for God's guidance, right? We don't want it, right? We want to keep our options open. If we ask God what to do, right? If we ask God, are you on my side? Will you back me up here? We might find out. And, God will say, yes, I will do this. And we'd rather have the yes, I will, and then do something else, right? That we want our options open. And Ahaz, in Ahaz's case, he doesn't want to handle this crisis the way that God has told him to. Instead, he wants to form an alliance of his own and see if he can, kind of do some advanced statesmanship or something. And really, he's not up to that task. But he wants the ability to. And if he asks God for a sign, and especially if he asks for one that's public and all of his counselors and advisors see it, then he's not going to have the option of ignoring it the way he would if he just says, oh no, I'm not going to test the Lord. So Isaiah sees through it and says, listen, house of David. So this is a little opportunistic jab at Ahaz. So 300 years ago, David was king. It was one country. They weren't invading themselves, and everything was great or great enough. And he's saying, man, things have really gone south from there. So you are part of the house of David. You're related to David. You're in his family tree, but you are no David. And so he's kind of this little drive-by slam on Ahaz. And so he says, isn't it enough for you to be tiresome for people? Tiresome for people. We're hungry, right? We can't go outside the walls, right? We are putting up with you because you're the king, right? And some of us probably think you're doing great, and some of us probably think you're doing terrible. But we're all having to deal with the problem that you have failed to fix. So yes, that's very tiresome, right? Isn't it enough that you've caused us trouble? Now you're going to cause God trouble too? So he says, isn't it enough for you to be tiresome for people that you are also tiresome before my God? And so enough. Therefore, the Lord is going to give you a sign, one you didn't ask for. He says, the young woman is pregnant, about to give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. Emmanuel with an I. So that's the sign. So what does he mean by that? So the word he uses for young woman is just the word a young woman, and we don't know who she is. Some scholars suspect that it might be Isaiah's wife because he has other children that get meaningful names later in the book of Isaiah. So maybe it's her, but there's somebody handy who Isaiah can point to and say, see her, she's going to have a child and it's going to be a son. So, this is before ultrasounds. Isaiah is saying, I know it is going to be a son. And when the son is born, that will be a sign to you that God has your back, right? I couldn't guess that, a 50% chance of being right, but I couldn't say it with any certainty. But I am telling you with certainty, there will be a son. And when he's born, they will name him Emmanuel. They will name him God is with us, as a reminder to you that you will see that, and that will be your sign. So that is the original meaning in the 700 BC. That's what Isaiah is getting at. But Matthew looks at it through the story of Christ. So 700 years later, Christ is born, he lives, he dies, he's raised, and Matthew, as one of his followers, is saying, I see that now. I see a deeper significance for it. It was great for Ahaz, as it turns out. By the time, and he goes on in that passage, it goes on and says, by the time this little baby is a toddler, your problem will have gone away, and it did. So it was a good sign. It was a sign of that thing that's going to come, which is your problem will go away. So it was helpful to them, but Matthew looks at it and says, but I see that now in the light of Christ as having a deeper significance. So what he writes is, now all of this, so what is all of this? This is when the angel comes and tells Joseph, don't divorce Mary. The child is from God, and she will give birth to a son, and they will name him Jesus because he will save his people from their sins. So that is all of this. And it took place so that what the Lord had spoken through the prophet would be fulfilled. So this is Matthew saying, I see now how this prophecy has a deeper meaning because of what's happened now with Jesus. So he says, look, a virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel. Now, we don't know who the woman was back in the time of Isaiah. She could have been a virgin. She could have been somebody, a non-virgin. We don't know, but by the time, during those 700 years, the Bible was translated into a different language. And in that language, it meant the word that they chose meant exclusively a virgin. And so Matthew is using the language that everybody would have been familiar with. Anybody in that era would have had some Greek, and so they would have known it that way. And he says that the virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son. And what Matthew is saying is, okay, what I understand now is that there was a sign 700 years ago of this thing that's happening now, but that in turn is a sign for us what will happen because of this baby. So he's saying that this is a deeper, richer, in every way it's more so than what happened 700 years ago. So it's the same idea. God is on your side, God has your back, but to a greater degree. So for example, instead of saving this king and Judah, he will save his people, right? He's going to save everybody. So the salvation will be much more widespread. He's going to, instead of saving people from the enemy, Israel and Aram, this coalition that's formed to fight Judah, instead of saving them from this temporary situation with these two other countries, he will save them from the great enemy who is sin. So he says he will save their people from their sin. And then he says, this virgin will become pregnant and give birth to a son. And so this is the idea that every baby is a miracle. You've probably heard that before. And they are to their parents. To those of us who are seeing them, we're kind of going, looks like a baby, right? But if you're the proud mother or father, it's like that's the most special thing in the world. Has there ever been anyone as precious as this, right? So babies are kind of everyday miracles. And what Matthew is saying is, here is a miracle that all the other everyday miracles are an echo of. They're kind of a ripple spreading out from that central miracle, the miracle of the baby who is born to a virgin. And so instead of having some proud father who's, strutting around feeling very, very fatherly, the Father is God. And so God is with us, not just in the sense that, somebody here on earth might be helped by the knowledge that God is with us in heaven, but God is with us right here. In human form, God is with us. So in all these different ways, Matthew is looking at Jesus and saying, he's what happened with Isaiah, only more so. In every possible way, Jesus is that sign of God's saving. I mean, he will later on be the salvation, but he is the sign as well as that salvation. He's the sign. Here's what he's going to do. 30 years before it happens, here is a sign of what he's going to do. And so he says, Emmanuel means God is with us. So he says, God now is not with us in heaven. God is with us right here on earth. So what Jesus does, Jesus proves that God has our back. Jesus is a sign. Now he will go on and do more than that, but he is, if anything else, he is a sign. The very fact that God gave us this sign that had been, that the Isaiah sign was a sign. Ahaz, you can be confident, I've got your back. This is the same thing. This is God saying, I've got this problem, right? And it also happens to be the solution. It's as if that little baby in the time of Isaiah also went out there and beat up the armies or something. But that's not the point of the name. The point of the name is simply, if you're wondering, does God have your back? The answer is Jesus. There's an old joke. How can you tell the difference between involved and committed? So if you think of a breakfast, bacon and eggs, the chickens are involved, but the pig is committed. Okay? And what Matthew is saying is God was involved in the time of Isaiah, and that was a sign because God kept his promise. But now God is committed. God is in this thing, as he is going to solve your problem. So you can have confidence that God has your back, even in bad circumstances when the doctor is telling you bad things, or your boss is giving you a pink slip, or a relationship is falling apart. When you are thinking, okay, well, it was easy back when things were good, but now things are not good, and I really do wonder sometimes, does God have my back? Jesus is not only the salvation of God, he is a sign that we can hold on to. We can remember that he's the consummate proof that God has our back. So what do we do with this? Remember it. Remember that God has your back. When things aren't pretty, when things are challenging, remember God has your back. Jesus is Emmanuel. God is with us. And so I just challenge you to think about that. If you had the utmost confidence, if you had an unshakable faith that no matter what else, God had your back, how would your life be different? If nothing could shake that, if you never, the thought never occurred to you, would your life be any different? Because if you sometimes think, I don't know, does he really? Jesus is the sign. And so ask yourself, if I trust that, how is my life going to be different? And the same question for us, how do we present ourselves to the world? Does the world look at Christians and say, you know what, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in their, their invisible sky friend, I don't believe in any of those things, but you know what, I'd like to have their confidence. They just go through life totally confident. It's as if they thought God had their back. And so, I don't know, maybe you've got great faith, and that's great, but think what it would be like if the whole church demonstrated that kind of faith in everything we did. Because this is why we're here, is so that people can look at us and say, oh, So you're saying God has our back? Wow, I never thought about it that way. Emmanuel means God has our back. It means God is in our corner, God is on our side, God is with us and will never desert us. It means our name is written on his hands. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, help us to remember. The hardest thing we do is remember. For 2,000 years, we've been trying to remember the promise that you are with us, that you have already done everything that needs to be done to save us from our great enemy, sin. Help us to trust that you will do everything else we need until Christ returns. We ask it in his name and for his sake. Amen.